Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Henry Jameson had built his life and his home with his own hands, including a cozy workshop in the backyard for his wife, Emma, to pursue her passion for crafting. But when a new neighbor, Linda Carroll, moved in with an agenda and a sharp tongue, their peaceful life spiraled into chaos, setting the stage for a battle neither of them could have imagined. Henry Jameson, a 42-year-old craftsman, prided himself on his ability to build and create. A quiet man with strong hands and a steady mind, he had always believed that a home was more than just a place to live. It was a reflection of love, care, and the memories shared within its walls. His house, a charming two-story in the suburbs of Virginia, stood as a testament to his values. Though modest by design, it held a special feature that made it truly unique. A small, handcrafted workshop tucked away at the back of the property. This workshop wasn't just another project for Henry, it was a labor of love. 10 years ago, he built it from the ground up as a gift for his wife, Emma. Emma, a talented artisan, had always found joy in creating. Whether it was intricately designed toys, whimsical decorations, or custom trinkets, her handiwork brought smiles to children and adults alike. Her small business, run primarily from her beloved workshop, allowed her to combine her passion with her entrepreneurial spirit. Customers adored her unique pieces, and she found a sense of purpose and fulfillment within those walls. The workshop, with its bright blue door and large windows that invited sunlight to stream in, quickly became Emma's sanctuary. Inside, shelves were lined with colorful fabrics, jars of buttons, and tools meticulously organized by size and purpose. The aroma of fresh wood mingled with hints of paint and glue, creating a cozy, creative haven. It wasn't just a workspace. It was a symbol of the life Henry and Emma had built together, a place of dreams, effort, and love. Their suburban neighborhood was the perfect backdrop for this idyllic life. It was a peaceful community with neat lawns, friendly neighbors, and a sense of quiet camaraderie. For years, Henry and Emma enjoyed the rhythm of their simple life, surrounded by the small-town charm that made every day feel like a warm embrace. But everything changed when Linda Carroll moved in next door. Linda, a former real estate agent in her early 50s, was nothing like the friendly faces Henry and Emma were used to. From the moment she arrived, she made her presence known. Within a week of moving in, she had knocked on their door, clipboard in hand, to discuss the unsightly structure she could see from her backyard, Emma's beloved workshop. Henry and Emma tried to welcome her warmly at first, brushing off her complaints as initial adjustment pains of a new neighbor. But it quickly became apparent that Linda was not interested in being a part of their peaceful community. Instead, she seemed determined to impose her own rigid standards on everyone around her. Linda's objections to the workshop were relentless. She claimed it clashed with the aesthetic of the neighborhood, that its bright blue door was an eyesore, and that it disrupted the view from her impeccably landscaped backyard. Despite Henry calmly explaining that the workshop was entirely within the property's boundaries and built with all necessary permits, Linda was unswayed. Her frequent complaints soon escalated into confrontational visits, her tone growing sharper with each interaction. At first, Henry and Emma tried to ignore Linda's behavior. They didn't want conflict, especially not with someone living so close. But Linda's persistence was hard to ignore. She began leaving notes in their mailbox, each one filled with passive-aggressive remarks about how their unprofessional setup brought down the neighborhood's property values. At times, Emma caught Linda staring at the workshop from her side of the fence, a displeased frown etched on her face. Still, Henry and Emma chose to focus on their life, unwilling to let Linda's attitude disrupt their joy. Emma continued to pour her heart into her creations, and Henry maintained the workshop with pride, touching up paint and making improvements whenever he had time. They held on to their belief that kindness and patience could resolve most conflicts, but Linda had no intention of letting the matter rest. What began as mere complaints would soon spiral into something much darker, threatening to upend the peace of their lives in ways they never could have anticipated. Linda's complaints, once dismissed as petty grievances, began to take on a more aggressive tone over the following months. She seemed to make it her personal mission to rid the neighborhood of Emma's beloved workshop. At first, her actions were subtle. Linda began peppering Henry and Emma with unsolicited advice about better ways to utilize their backyard space. "You know," she said one day while standing at the fence dividing their properties, "a nice gazebo would look much classier back there. Something neutral, maybe beige. That workshop of yours, it's just so distracting. Henry, who was repairing the latch on the workshop door, glanced up with a measured look. We like it as it is, Linda. Thanks for the suggestion, though. Linda's smile tightened. I'm sure the rest of the neighborhood would appreciate something more subdued. The following week, a notice appeared in Henry and Emma's mailbox. It was a formal-looking letter signed by Linda, claiming to represent the concerned neighbors of Aspen Lane. The letter outlined a list of supposed grievances regarding the workshop, its obtrusive color, its size, and its proximity to her property. Linda insisted that it violated the harmonious aesthetic of the community. Henry couldn't suppress a wry chuckle as he read it aloud to Emma. Concerned neighbors? She's talking about herself. This is just Linda being Linda. Emma, however, was less amused. She had noticed Linda lingering by their fence more frequently, often with her phone out, as if she were taking pictures of the workshop. The thought unsettled her, but she tried to dismiss it. She can take all the photos she wants, Emma said with forced optimism. We're not doing anything wrong. But Linda wasn't satisfied with just notes and letters. She began escalating her campaign. One afternoon, Emma returned from running errands to find a city code enforcement officer standing in her backyard, clipboard in hand. Can I help you? Emma asked, alarmed. The officer, polite but firm, explained that he was there to investigate a report of an unpermitted structure on the property. Emma's heart sank. It didn't take much guessing to figure out who had filed the complaint. Henry arrived moments later, and the two of them provided all the necessary documents, including the original building permits for the workshop. After a thorough review, the officer nodded apologetically. Everything checks out. You're completely within your rights. I'll close this case. When the officer left, Henry stared toward Linda's house, his jaw tight with frustration. She's crossing the line, Emma. That evening, as they sat on the porch, they discussed their options. Henry wanted to confront Linda directly, but Emma hesitated. What if that just makes things worse? She asked, her voice filled with worry. They decided to take the high road for now, hoping Linda would eventually tire of her crusade. But Linda had no intention of letting go. A week later, Emma discovered a new surprise. Stuck to the bright blue door of her workshop was a fluorescent pink note that read, "This structure is illegal and must be removed immediately." Below the message was Linda's unmistakable signature. Enough is enough, Henry growled, crumpling the note in his fist. He walked straight to Linda's front door and rang the bell. When she answered, her expression was smug. "Henry," she said sweetly, "what brings you here?" "You need to stop," Henry said, his voice firm but calm. "The workshop is entirely legal, and your constant harassment has to end. We've been patient, but we're not going to tolerate this anymore." Linda's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "I'm only looking out for the neighborhood. You wouldn't want to drag this into something bigger, would you?" "I've already spoken to a lawyer about your non-compliance." Henry narrowed his eyes. "Non-compliance? You don't have any authority here. If you keep this up, we'll get the law involved." Linda shrugged. "Do what you must," she said, before closing the door in his face. Over the next few weeks, Linda's behavior grew bolder. She began hosting small gatherings in her backyard, where she loudly complained about the eyesore next door. Her comments became so pointed that other neighbors began approaching Henry and Emma with awkward smiles and murmurs of support. "Don't mind her," one of them said. "Linda's always been intense." But it wasn't just words anymore. One afternoon, while Emma was in the workshop finishing a new order, she heard a loud banging on the side of the structure. Rushing outside, she found Linda with a measuring tape, pacing along the property line. "Just confirming a suspicion," Linda said coolly. "You might want to double-check those boundaries." Emma felt her hands tremble with anger. "You're trespassing, Linda. Leave, or I'll call the police." Linda smirked. "Go ahead." The tension was unbearable, but nothing could have prepared Henry and Emma for what would happen next. When the couple decided to take a week-long trip to visit Henry's mother, they never imagined it would be the opening Linda had been waiting for. When Henry and Emma returned from their week-long trip to visit family, they were exhausted, but happy to be home. As they pulled into the driveway, their smiles faded. Henry's foot hit the brake hard, the car jerking to a halt. The backyard, once a peaceful space with Emma's beloved workshop, now looked like a disaster zone. The workshop was gone. In its place was a gaping void, littered with broken wood, shattered glass, and scraps of Emma's carefully stored materials. Henry and Emma sat in stunned silence, unable to process the destruction. Emma was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Where is it, Henry? Where's my workshop?" Henry, his hands tightening on the steering wheel, could barely find words. "I don't know," he muttered, "but I can guess." Their neighbor Linda stood in her backyard, arms crossed and watching them with an expression that bordered on satisfaction. She made no attempt to hide her presence, her smug smile growing as Henry and Emma stepped out of the car. "I see you're back," Linda called, strolling toward the property line. "I imagine you noticed the improvement." Henry marched toward her, his face a storm of fury. "What have you done, Linda?" he demanded. Linda shrugged as if she were discussing the weather. "I simply took care of a problem. That eyesore of yours was encroaching on my property, so I had it removed. You should be thanking me. It was illegal anyway." Emma, who had been standing frozen near the wreckage, finally found her voice. You destroyed my workshop? My work? Everything I've built?" Tears streamed down her face as she gestured to the pile of debris. "It's not your property," Linda snapped. "I hired a surveyor, and it was clear as day that your little shack was crossing onto my land. I had every right." "Surveyor?" Henry barked. "You mean the one you probably hired to fake a boundary dispute? Because I've got the permits, the original surveys, and everything proving that building was on my property." Linda waved her hand dismissively. "Take it up with the courts, then. But you won't win. I've already consulted my lawyer." Henry's jaw tightened. "You're right about one thing, Linda. This will be handled in court, and I'll make damn sure you're held accountable for every piece of damage you've done." Without another word, Henry stormed back to Emma, wrapping a protective arm around her as she stared at the destruction in disbelief. He led her into the house, promising her that they would make things right. The next morning, Henry began his fight. His first call was to the local police department, filing a formal report for trespassing and destruction of property. Officers arrived later that day to document the scene, taking photographs of the debris and noting that the foundation where Linda had poured concrete extended well into Henry's yard. She claimed she had legal grounds to do this, one officer asked. "She claims a lot of things," Henry replied bitterly, "but she doesn't have a leg to stand on." Henry also called their lawyer, a no-nonsense property law specialist named Angela Grayson. When Henry explained the situation, Angela was appalled. "This isn't just a property dispute," she said. "This is criminal, destruction of property, trespassing, and if she really falsified a survey, that's fraud. We'll build a strong case, but I need you to gather every document you have, permits, surveys, anything that proves the legality of the workshop." By the end of the week, Angela had prepared an injunction against Linda, forbidding her from further altering the property until the matter was resolved. She also filed a civil suit seeking damages for the loss of the workshop, Emma's destroyed inventory, and the emotional distress Linda had caused. Meanwhile, Linda remained unapologetic. She continued to strut around her yard, now with an air of self-righteousness. Whenever Henry or Emma stepped outside, she would call out snide remarks. "Good luck with your little lawsuit," she jeered one afternoon. "Courts don't take kindly to people who build illegally." But Linda's bravado began to crack when court summons arrived at her door. Angela's legal team had uncovered glaring inconsistencies in Linda's supposed survey, and the evidence was damning. The official surveys submitted with Henry's permits clearly showed the workshop was built entirely on his property, and interviews with neighbors confirmed it had been there for a decade without issue. The final blow came when Angela tracked down the construction crew Linda had hired to destroy the workshop. One worker provided a written statement, admitting that Linda had instructed them to tear it down while the owners were away, emphasizing that no one would notice. By the time the case went to court, Linda's confidence had withered. The judge, an experienced and no-nonsense woman, wasted little time addressing the core issue. Linda tried to justify her actions, but her arguments fell apart under scrutiny. "You had no legal right to destroy this structure," the judge said firmly. "Not only was it entirely on the plaintiff's property, but your claim of a boundary dispute has been proven false. Your actions were reckless, unlawful, and deeply damaging to the lives of your neighbors." Henry and Emma sat together, their hands tightly clasped, as the judge handed down her ruling. Linda was found guilty of trespassing, destruction of property, and malicious intent. She was ordered to pay full restitution for the workshop and Emma's lost inventory, as well as damages for emotional distress. As the court adjourned, Linda was left speechless, her smug demeanor shattered. Henry and Emma left the courthouse with a sense of relief, knowing justice had prevailed, but also with the realization that their battle with Linda had forever changed their once peaceful lives. The courthouse steps felt lighter beneath Henry and Emma as they walked out, though the weight of the past months lingered heavily on their shoulders. The ruling in their favor was a relief, but the damage Linda had done was still tangible. Emma's once thriving workshop lay in ruins, her creative space reduced to scattered remnants, and the emotional toll of the ordeal had left a lasting mark on both of them. Despite their victory, there was little time to dwell. Linda, now visibly deflated, avoided eye contact as she left the courthouse, flanked by her lawyer. The restitution order, nearly $90,000 for the destruction of the workshop, loss of inventory, and emotional damages, was an undeniable blow to her. The judge had been firm in her ruling. Linda's actions were reckless and malicious, and her claims of a boundary dispute had been exposed as fraudulent. But for Henry and Emma, the focus now shifted from legal battles to rebuilding their lives. The first step was clearing the wreckage. Henry, ever the craftsman, found catharsis in picking up the pieces. Friends and neighbors, many of whom had watched the drama unfold with a mix of sympathy and disbelief, offered their help. Within days, the debris was removed, leaving behind the cracked and uneven patch of concrete Linda had poured. "Don't worry," Henry reassured Emma as they stood together, surveying the empty space. "We're going to build something even better." Emma tried to smile, though her heart ached at the loss of her sanctuary. "It's hard to imagine it now," she said softly, "but I trust you." As Linda's reputation in the neighborhood crumbled, her once pristine home became a symbol of her disgrace. The restitution order forced her to put the house on the market, and whispers among the neighbors confirmed that she planned to leave town altogether. "I hear she's moving to a condo in the city," one neighbor said with a mix of relief and schadenfreude. Good riddance. For Henry and Emma, the departure brought some closure. The tension that had hung over their home, like a storm cloud, began to lift. With Linda gone, Henry got to work designing a new workshop for Emma. This time, he planned something even more spacious and functional, ensuring that it would not only replace what was lost, but exceed it in every way. Over the next 2 months, the backyard became a construction zone once again, but this time it was filled with energy and hope. Henry poured his skills and love into every detail, consulting Emma on the design to make sure it met all her needs. The new workshop was larger, with skylights to let in natural light, reinforced storage for materials, and a cozy nook for Emma to relax and brainstorm new ideas. "It's perfect," Emma whispered the day it was completed. She ran her fingers over the polished wooden workbench Henry had built for her. "Better than I ever dreamed." Her business slowly came back to life. Word spread about the incident with Linda, and the support from customers and neighbors was overwhelming. Orders flooded in, many accompanied by heartfelt notes expressing admiration for Emma's resilience and creativity. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood began to change as well. Inspired by Henry and Emma's perseverance, the community started to address deeper issues. Some neighbors, who had initially sided with Linda out of fear or apathy, reached out to apologize. Others organized neighborhood meetings to discuss boundaries, both physical and interpersonal, and ways to prevent future conflicts from escalating. "It's funny," Henry said one evening as he and Emma sat on the porch, watching the sun set over their backyard. "Linda thought she was protecting the neighborhood, but all she did was bring us closer together by showing us what not to do." Emma chuckled softly. "You have to admit, though, she did leave us with one thing." Henry raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "A new foundation, literally and figuratively." The workshop stood as a beacon of their triumph, not just over Linda's malice, but over the hardships they had faced together. For Henry and Emma, it wasn't just a structure, it was a testament to their resilience, a symbol of love, and a reminder that no matter how destructive someone's actions might be, a strong foundation can always be rebuilt. Though the scars of the ordeal would linger, their lives slowly returned to a new normal, one that felt stronger and brighter than before. In the months following Linda's departure, a newfound sense of peace settled over Henry and Emma's lives. The absence of her toxic presence felt like a weight had been lifted, not only for them, but for the entire neighborhood. Aspen Lane, once tense and divided by Linda's antics, began to transform into the friendly and supportive community it was always meant to be. The most immediate impact was on Henry and Emma's backyard. The new workshop stood proudly where the old one had been, its design a reflection of their resilience and determination. The skylights bathed the interior in soft, natural light, and Emma's shelves were once again filled with colorful fabrics, jars of buttons, and the tools of her trade. Every time she stepped inside, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. "I never thought it would feel like home again," Emma admitted to Henry one evening as they shared tea in the cozy nook of the workshop. "But it does. You've made it even better." Her business flourished. The local community, moved by her story, rallied around her. Customers who had heard of her struggles placed orders in droves, often leaving notes of encouragement with their purchases. Emma found herself overwhelmed by the support, not just financially, but emotionally. Beyond their property line, Aspen Lane was changing too. The neighbors who had once passively endured Linda's domineering behavior began to take a more active role in fostering a sense of unity. One afternoon, a group of neighbors knocked on Henry's door, led by Mrs. Turner, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. "We're organizing a block party," she said with a warm smile. "It's been years since we had one, but it feels like the right time. We'd love for you and Emma to come." The block party turned out to be more than just a celebration. It was a turning point for the neighborhood. Over shared dishes and laughter, residents discussed ways to ensure their community remained welcoming and supportive. New agreements were made about respecting property boundaries, and many neighbors even took the opportunity to mend old misunderstandings. For Henry and Emma, the change was remarkable. Neighbors who had once seemed distant now waved warmly as they passed, some even stopping by to chat or ask if they needed help with anything. It was a stark contrast to the atmosphere Linda had fostered, and it was clear that her departure had been a catalyst for something positive. The most touching moment came weeks later when a group of local kids knocked on Emma's workshop door. "We made this for you," one of them said shyly, holding out a handmade sign that read, "Emma's Creative Haven," in bright, colorful letters. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the gift. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. She hung the sign proudly above the door, where it became a symbol of the community's love and support. Henry, too, found himself reflecting on the lessons of the past months. Sitting on the porch one evening, he told Emma, "You know, I always thought home was just what we built here, our house, your workshop. But now I realize it's also the people around us. This neighborhood has become a part of us, just as much as we're a part of it." Emma nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Sometimes it takes going through the worst to bring out the best in people. The trial, the destruction, and the heartbreak had tested them in ways they never imagined, but from that pain had come growth, not just for them, but for everyone around them. Their story became one of triumph, not only over adversity, but over isolation. Together, Henry and Emma had rebuilt more than a workshop. They had helped to restore a sense of community that would last for years to come. Emma's business flourished in ways she never expected. The challenges she had faced made her work more meaningful, and the support from her customers and neighbors reinforced her belief in the power of community. Her handcrafted toys and decorations, now often bearing small inscriptions like "Made with Love and Strength," became a signature of her brand. Orders poured in not just locally, but from surrounding towns, as word of her story continued to spread. For Henry, the experience deepened his appreciation for what they had built, not just their home, but their partnership. He realized that standing by Emma, protecting her dreams, and fighting for their rights had made their bond stronger than ever. The neighborhood also carried the scars and lessons of the ordeal. Aspen Lane had become closer, more connected. Neighbors who once barely spoke now greeted one another warmly, shared resources, and checked in regularly. Linda's departure had served as a wake-up call, reminding everyone of the importance of mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as Henry and Emma sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma turned to him. "Do you think we'd be here now if it weren't for everything we went through?" Henry thought for a moment, then shook his head. But I think that's the point. We went through it, and we came out stronger. It wasn't easy, but it made us who we are today." Emma smiled, her hand finding his. "It feels like home again. Even better, maybe." The workshop door swung gently in the breeze, the sign above it, Emma's Creative Haven, catching the golden light of the setting sun. It stood as a quiet reminder of what they had endured and what they had overcome. The ordeal had taught them the value of persistence, the power of community, and the importance of fighting for what truly matters. Though the memory of Linda's actions might never completely fade, it had been replaced by something far more enduring: the strength of love, determination, and the unshakable foundation they had built together.